Lutheran Church in America. His son, John Peter, became a U.S. Senator, and son Frederick became the first Speaker of the House. Henry Muhlenberg pastored near Valley Forge during the Revolutionary War. He commented, "I heard a fine example today, namely that His Excellency George Washington rode around among his army yesterday and admonished each and every one to fear God, to put away wickedness, and to practice Christian virtues. The Lord God has marvelously preserved him from harm in the midst of countless perils."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And friends, thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on VCY America. It was 1 year ago today that Israel came under attack by air, land, and water from Hamas, an Islamic terrorist organization. It was called Israel's 9/11. It was the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust. The barbaric slaughter of men, women, and children turned the stomach of the world as this Islamic terrorist group carried out their rampage. In response, Israel's prime minister declared war, and was for the first time that the Security Cabinet of Israel voted to go to war against another enemy since the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Attacks have continued against Israel from Hamas, from Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Even this morning, 1 year later, alarms sounded again as Hamas launched a missile barrage towards central Israel. And in the face of all of this, anti-Israel rallies have been staged. Israel has been blamed for causing the attack against herself on October 7th. United Nations resolutions have come against Israel, and now countries are threatening an arms embargo against Israel. The FBI is warning Americans that terrorism may come to the U.S. and to be aware of your surroundings today. Joining us to discuss this 1 year anniversary, we welcome back Dr. Richard Schmidt, who is the pastor of Union Grove Baptist Church and founder of Prophecy Focus Ministries. He does appear on the programs Prophecy Focus and his radio broadcast Prophecy Unfolding, some 32 years of law enforcement, including that of sheriff in the city of and the county of Milwaukee. Authored several books: Are You Going to a Better Place?, Daniel's Gap, Paul's Mystery, Tribulation to Triumph, The Olivet Discourse, Globalism, the Great World Consumption, and Artificial Intelligence, Transhumanism, and the De-Evolution of Democracy. Dr. Schmidt, welcome back here to Crosstalk.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This is really a historic time that we're going through, and well worth discussing.
Israel National News has a story today indicating that October 7th was 1 year ago, but it still hurts like yesterday. Pastor Schmidt, take us back to that infamous day of October 7th, 2023.
Well, once again, as we recall the historical facts about what took place 1 year ago, quite frankly, Israel was in a state of rest at that time. They had no idea that there was going to be any attacks coming against them. Of course, the open source reporting that we've done here and other places make it very clear that there were things that were taking place on the border with Gaza. There had been a significant amount of rockets that Gaza had been shooting into Israel for years, which was nothing unusual. But on that particular morning of October 7th, all of a sudden there's apparently quite a bit of movement along the border, which quite frankly was going undetected. And unfortunately, because Israel was actually on holiday at that time, the IDF was kind of standing down. Quite frankly, they got taken by surprise. And a massive movement of Hamas terrorists started to come through the border, breaking down the border walls, shooting through the fences, killing, if you will, the guards that were at the camera sites there, pushed down the walls, and then thousands of terrorists came pouring into the southern border of Israel. And unfortunately, we know the tragic results of 1,200 people, Jewish people, that were butchered, maimed, harassed, killed. raped, and so much more, just brutally treated, which of course has led to what we've now seen for the last year, a horrific war between Hamas and Israel, as well as other entities.
Indeed, and with us being a year past right now, we know that hostages still remain, and I know there's some variance of depending on news services, but the Daily Wire this morning indicated the remaining hostages, 64 are believed to be alive, another 33 who are deceased, 4 Americans still being held hostage. What is your information on this?
Well, again, on October 7th of 2023, we know that 251 hostages were taken. Many of them have died since then. They were killed in captivity, if you will. Some had been released, which, of course, we're thankful for. But as of right now, we believe there's 101 hostages. At least their bodies are still within Hamas. The numbers that you gave are a little more promising than the ones I've heard. Actually,
again, that was a Daily Wire.
Right. Yeah, so, I hope that's true, but some of the sources that I've had have said the majority of those individuals are deceased. And again, that's one of the great things that Israel still has to do, is get into Hamas areas still, try and recover all those that are alive, and we pray that there are more alive.
One of the things that Israel had to encounter was a very comprehensive tunnel system, and I know, from what I understand, even this tunnel system exceeded Israel's knowledge how very vast this tunnel system was.
Yeah, and that's one of the wonderful things, again, about the technology and what Israel's been able to do. Their original thoughts were, well, maybe we've got 100 miles or so of tunnels, and it turns out to be exponentially larger than that. One of the things, of course, that we've seen and is what they call bunker blasters and bombs, literally, that are tearing up a bunch of these tunnels. Back at the beginning, they were talking about flooding the tunnels, which, of course, they retracted on because of the hostage situation. They didn't want to kill our own. But yes, a massive billions of dollars that had to be spent. We, as Americans, have probably financed some of those tunnels, even though it was never intended to be so. So a massive amount of terrorist activity has been used, money has been misspent, and they have this massive terror tunnels that did exist.
And I think also pointing out that these tunnels, many times entrances are going from a child's bedroom, outside an elementary school, outside medical establishments, hospitals, and so forth. I mean, there is no second thought by Hamas to have civilians stand in front of them to shield them from the attack from Israel.
Right. This is one of the biggest problems that the Israel Defense Forces had to face, and especially with the mainstream media, is that the IDF Israel Defense Force are killing innocent people. Well, the fact is about 40,000 people have died in the Gaza Strip, but the majority of those, of course, being terrorists. And the good thing that the Israel Defense Force have done, Benjamin Netanyahu has done, they almost always, at least to our knowledge, give preemptive warning. We're going to be taking out this hospital. We're going to take out this school. We're going to be taking out this building, because we know and have bona fide proof, we have intelligence that proves that the terrorist organization is working in those buildings. And every time they've gone in, and I watched this very carefully, the Israel Defense Force takes pictures, they take videos, and they show all the weapons, the massive amount of weapons that have been stored under the hospitals and the schools and the other things that you mentioned. So it's been very strategic, and quite frankly, when you think about this thing that they, if you will, the fake news keeps putting out about the genocide, if Israel would have literally blown up the place, which they could have, there have been hundreds of thousands of deaths, not 41,000.
And yet, even despite all the warnings Israel give, I mean, those we'll say civilians have been killed, and the media, just does not relent on showcasing this and blaming Israel, their ruthlessness, and finger pointing at Israel as they're being barbaric.
Yeah, and again, one thing we have to remember, this is war. Hamas, those that run, if you will, the Gaza Strip, they declared war on Israel when they broke through the borders. They butchered people. And it's like, okay, well, they did a bad thing, so you've killed a few people. Let's just be satisfied and moved on. Well, the Jewish people can't be satisfied, because if you don't wipe out the terrorist group, they're just going to keep happening over and over and over again, like we've been seeing.
We'll talk about the north in just a moment, what's happening there. But first of all, as we deal with Gaza, Israel systematically going through Gaza to root out the Hamas terrorists. And in doing so, there have been talk that we're getting closer and closer to a ceasefire. Is that completely off the table at this point?
Well, I don't see any hope for a ceasefire at this particular juncture. Based on things are ramping up. As you already stated, we'll talk about Hezbollah and the Houthis and Iran, other different groups that are still spiking. It's unbelievable to me that after a year's time, Gaza was still able to fire several rockets into Israel today.
Right.
We thought that by now that would have been completely eliminated. Well, they keep popping up. They keep somehow getting weapons into Hamas, the Gaza Strip. So until that threat stops, the war is going to continue. There's no hope for a ceasefire at this point.
So not only did Israel have direct attacks from Hamas, and Israel has been systematically rooting out Hamas, but there have been multiple attacks from the north, from the Islamic group known as Hezbollah. What can you tell us about this?
Well, of course, Hezbollah originally was staying out of the equation, which, of course, is to the north of Israel, Gaza being to the south, which is where Hamas has been fighting. So now we have, if you will, Hezbollah, which has been stated. I mean, quite frankly, Israel, based on the media and based on the intelligence from the Israel Defense Force, they actually were quite scared of what Hezbollah was going to be able to pull off. So what took place, as we now know, Israel said, we're not going to wait around for Hezbollah to start sending hundreds of thousands of potential rockets at us, which is the number that they supposedly had. Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet decided we're going to take what they would call preemptive strikes, which means what? They literally went into Lebanon, went to every, and they have to have great intelligence. How they're getting all this wonderful information, of course, will remain secret with Mossad and Shin Bet and so forth, but they knew where the major areas were where the rockets were being stored, and they've been wiping them out. So even though quite a few rockets are still coming in from Lebanon, a massive amount have been destroyed by preemptive strikes, which has really been a blessing for Israel.
And also we saw the remarkable pager attack with the exploding pagers one day, and then the exploding walkie-talkies the day after.
Well, what's interesting about that, and this is really pretty much breaking news a couple of days ago, everybody's been trying to figure out how did these pagers get the explosives in them and so forth. And I just had a report that came out just a couple of days ago that said the Mossad actually had a shell company that were making these pagers. So when they made the orders, they were happy to fulfill them with the explosives within them. So, and to be quite frank, I know some people are, if the word is offended or appalled by how this took place, it's very nasty. I mean, they pick up the pager, they blow up. A lot of individuals are blind now. Their hands are removed. Body parts have been destroyed. Some have even died from it. But again, this is war. And when war takes place, unfortunately, horrible, despicable things take place. It's war.
And many leaders of Hezbollah, including their top leader, has been removed, removed from the scene and exterminated, is what terms that they use.
Yeah, and if you look at the command staff, and I actually have pictures of the entire command staff of Hamas, almost all of them have been eliminated. I mean, the intelligence, the Israel Defense Force, they find out what cars they're in, what homes they're in, and they bomb them. I mean, they're not playing games. They take out the leaders. The main guy, Nasrallah, that you just referred to, 60 tons of bombs were dropped on the place where he was. They eliminated him.
Yeah, and again, perhaps thinking there was not a threat, as Israel's prime minister was in New York City speaking at the United Nations. Friends, we'll be back in just 1 minute. We're talking with Dr. Richard Schmidt today. Hamas attacks Israel 1 year later, and it's not just Hamas and Hezbollah, but right from the head itself, Iran. More on that after the break. This is Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how long does it take to make oil?
Chris, oil is the altered remains of organic molecules. These are primarily hydrogen and carbon, and after death they can metamorphose into hydrocarbon oil. It doesn't take long. In fact, there are a number of ways to rapidly convert organic material into oil, but all of them are rather expensive and inefficient. However, if water is injected into the organic material, then the process is much more efficient and quick. This reminds me of the great flood of Noah's day, when excessive heat and pressures combined with lots of waters to act on the abundant living things which were destroyed by the flood. Chris, it all fits. Even the difficult questions like the origin of oil can best be answered from a back to Genesis perspective.
To find out more about creation science, visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
This is Crosstalk on the VCY America Network. Dr. Richard Schmidt, our guest here today, as we remember the attack on Israel 1 year ago today. We are going to be looking more at Iran here in just a moment as well, but just looking at what is coming right now from Gaza. And people talk about, well, this is not the Palestinians. This is Hamas. These Islamic terror group that has taken over here. But we have to recognize that the Palestinians voted to put Hamas into authority. And I just received this today from Palestinian Media Watch. In the polls that have been taken, it's not just Hamas, it's all Palestinians. 98% said October 7th events made them proud.
Well, isn't that a horrible statement when you see a group of individuals, and we got to get back to the basics. What is the problem? Why in the world won't this stop? This is not a normal war. This is not one country saying, well, we want a little more power. This is a religious war, and these individuals are willing to die, if you will, to fight for their faith. And when we're talking about Islamic Jihad, when we're talking about the Quran and so forth, I mean, this is their faith. This is what they believe in, and obviously they're willing to die for it. So in 2006, when the group, if you will, in Gaza, the Palestinians decided to vote in Hamas, this was a religious move as well as a political move. So they are willing to go, if you will, till death do us part on this particular issue because it is their faith. They will die for it.
Many have wondered, where does the funding for Hamas come, the funding for Hezbollah as well? Well, next on the docket was a direct attack from Iran. Last Tuesday, a missile attack. Iran's UN ambassador declared the missile attack a necessary and proportionate response to what he called Israel's continued terrorist aggressive attacks. The Prime Minister of Israel said Iran made a big mistake and is going to pay for it. We will stand by the rule we've established. Whoever attacks us, we will attack him. This is true wherever we fight the axis of evil.
Right. So again, what precipitated all this? Well, Israel again said if you're going to be a top leader, you're going to take out, and they have, by the way, Nasrallah, the one that they killed, had also taken out, been responsible for American deaths as well. So we forget a lot of these things that on our air bases and in our military and so forth that Iran has had a piece of the pie, if you will, in taking out Americans. So they're culpable on that. But what's the big deal? Well, when this head leader that you described a couple of times now, Nasrallah, he was, if you will, the top dog, the top leader for this group. And when Israel came after him in a big, big way and killed him, Iran said, we got to save face. We've got to come back after Israel. So as we know, just a few days ago, some 200 missiles and UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, were sent towards Israel. About 181 of those actually made it into Israel territory. And fortunately, and praise the Lord once again, a couple of them managed to land on fields. A few did land, as we have now been told, in some military areas of Israel, and there was some destruction, but the great news is no one was killed, a few people injured. So when you think about 181 rockets coming at you and that minimal of damage and zero casualties, really, it's a miracle.
And Israel's prime minister has vowed to retaliate.
Well, here we go. So what's going to take place? And we're all waiting for what is the next move. So we know what happened last time when Israel went in. Now, here's the thing. America is trying to get Israel to stand down again or pick what we'll call soft targets or things that won't really hurt, if you will, Iran. So they don't want them to attack their nuclear sites. Well, you have this...
the very nuclear sites we have helped to prop up with the money that President Biden advanced to them that President Trump had stopped.
Right, and it's interesting. Of course, it's an election year in America, so you have President Trump saying, "Why? What do you mean you're not going to hit their nuclear? Of course you should hit them." And then you have President Biden saying, "No, we don't want to upset them and whatever." So you've got this political nonsense that's going on. So is Israel going to attack the nuclear sites? We'll find out. Are they going to go after their oil? That's another thing that America's pushing Israel. Don't hit their oil supplies because it'll cause our supplies to be diminished and raise the prices.
This story just came out from Newsmax.com this morning, and it says the Biden administration has offered Israel a compensation package if it refrains from striking certain targets in Iran as part of its retaliation for Tehran's October 1st attack. This Israel's Can News public broadcaster reported yesterday. U.S. officials offered their Israeli counterparts extensive diplomatic backing and additional military aid if certain targets inside Iranian territory were spared, according to this report.
Well, isn't that lovely? I mean, it's almost unconscionable to even read this type of a thing. I mean, not your reading of it, but to put this out, it's like, are you kidding me? Iran is the head of the evil axis. Everyone knows it. The Houthis, the Hamas, Hezbollah, everything that's taking place. The terrorists that are currently in our country and around the world that are just ready to explode whenever they get the right word. If you don't start putting, if you will, Iran in its place, you're just empowering them to do more damage.
As a matter of fact, President Biden has said he fully supports Israel. We've heard, I fully support Israel, and yet he opposes Israel going after Iran's nuclear capabilities or the oil that you mentioned, but he wants Israel to respond proportionally.
Yeah, what does that mean? Everything is politics. And it really is disturbing that America is even trying to play nice with a terrorist country of Iran. Now, the one thing I do want to say, which I have heard quite a bit on this, is that the Islamic majority, if you will, in Iran is not supporting what the Iranian government is doing. In fact, I've heard the number of 40% are actually supporting it, which means 60% are not. So that's a major shift that's happened in Iran. They don't want the citizens that want to live normal lives. They don't want to get blown up. They don't want to have all this nonsense taking place. So there is some sense of a little bit of rebellion among their own people because they don't want to die for it.
Is not the Ayatollah the one calling the shots in all this?
Absolutely. And, of course, it's been made very plain that especially since Nasrallah got blown out by the massive attack from Israel, they've had to take the Ayatollah Khomeini, hide him somewhere because, and again, your hiding is only as good as the lack of intelligent information coming out. So if they got a mole, he's not safe anywhere.
Nasrallah's replacement, we understand, also has been eliminated.
Yes, so they've been trying to find him or hear from him for several days, and it's all but confirmed that he's been killed. And, of course, the little bit of satire on that is if you want to become one of the leaders of Hamas or one of these terror groups, you're basically got a target on your back.
Vice President Harris just on 60 Minutes, and she sidestepped a question that was posed to her, and they've got the clip out on the 60 Minutes as to if the U.S. has a close ally in Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And she responded, with all due respect, the better question is, do we have an important alliance between the American people and the Israeli people? And the answer to that question is yes. She spoke volumes there. She would not vouch for an ally with the Prime Minister.
Yeah, and again, we all know that when Benjamin Netanyahu came to Washington, the excuses were given as to why she couldn't be there, but you just don't do that from a political standpoint.
She's the tie-breaking vote in the Senate on all things. I mean, she presides over the Senate.
Yeah, and She chose not to support Benjamin Netanyahu with his speech, so basically boycotted it, along with many others, by the way, that were supportive of the Palestinians. So it just tells you where our current administration is at when it comes to Israel and when it comes to, are they truly one of our allies with this particular administration?
I have an interesting statement coming out yesterday as well from the former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, and he strongly condemned the Biden administration yesterday for openly discouraging Israel from striking Iranian nuclear sites or oil fields. And I thought it's very interesting because Iran is doing everything possible to get this enriched uranium to have what they need for. If Iran has open source, if they have open accessibility, that's the word I was looking for, to nuclear weaponry. Woe be to the world. Woe be to Israel.
Woe be to America.
Yeah.
And it's very disturbing. I know this issue with Israel with Iran has been going on for years and years and years about the potential for nuclear warfare. Why? What sense does it make from an American standpoint, from an American national security standpoint, to allow one of our enemy countries that has made it very clear that America is the big Satan, Israel's a little Satan? Why in the world do we want to empower them with nuclear weapons of all things? It makes zero sense. I can only use one word. It's corrupt. There's massive corruption involved here. Whose team is our administration on?
As we review this year as well, we see that all through this process that the United Nations has taken up resolution after resolution against Israel in all of this, and it's reported that the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, has yet to condemn Hamas for the October 7th attack.
All right. Well, it obviously tells you where the UN is at. I really, and this is kind of it's not funny, but it almost has a funny ring to it. Benjamin Netanyahu takes off several days ago and goes to the United Nations to speak. I question, why in the world would Benjamin Netanyahu go to the United Nations, and why waste your time going there? That was my thought. That is the time when Israel bombed Nasrallah, and again, it came out that it was a tactical move, basically, to get Nasrallah and his lead people into their bunker where they would watch Benjamin Netanyahu's speech. So it was all, again, extremely calculated. Everything was put together. It worked seamlessly to get rid of, if you will, these terrorist heads. So you've just got to hand it to the Israelis, and I guess you could easily say, did God give them some extreme wisdom? Well, it certainly appears that way.
We also have the whole matter of the Houthis as well, launching an attack from Yemen this past Friday.
Well, they did. And again, they've done, this is like a 1,200-mile flight to get from Yemen all the way up into Israel. Wow. And they've attacked them before. Israel, and again, you think you'd learn from your mistakes. The last time that they did that, which was a few months ago, Israel came in and blew up their oil depots. I mean, massive amount of loss that happened. Well, again, Israel repaid for the rocket that came from the Houthis, and it's just tremendous damage. But again, what is driving all of this? And we come right back to what you said. Who's the boss? Who's the head of this? They're attacking from the north, the south, the southeast, if you will, from the west. All of these, I mean, they're just surrounded. But one guy, known as Mr. Khomeini, is the puppet master, and it doesn't matter who's hurt, who dies, how many people are injured. Let's just do it. Wipe out Israel.
And he is of his father, the devil.
Yeah, John chapter 8, verse 44 talks about the lying devil. Well, it fits.
Yeah, it does. Back in a minute here, friends, on Crosstalk on the VCY America Network. Dr. Richard Schmidt, our guest today. We're talking about the Hamas attack upon Israel 1 year later. And despite all of that's going on, they're calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Back in 1 minute here on Crosstalk.
Imagine if you could change society's stance on abortion.
How do you feel about the issue of abortion?
I think in some situations it can be necessary.
So have you just changed your mind about abortion?
Yeah.
Would you ever vote for someone who is for the killing of children in the womb?
No.
I believe in someone's right to choose.
You're going to change your stance on it?
Yeah, it's definitely making me think, yeah.
What was the compelling question to change people's minds on abortion? From Ray Comfort comes the DVD 180, featuring street interviews in which people who were pro-abortion changed 180 degrees to pro-life.
So have you just changed your mind about abortion?
Yeah.
180 is available for a donation to VCY of just $5, 5 copies for a donation of $18, or 10 copies for a donation of $25. Call 1-800-729-9829. Ask for the DVD 180.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. And friends, if you listened to Crosstalk last Friday, Dalton Windsor had a news roundup here and spent a lot of time talking about the hurricane and its impact and even the statements that are coming. Those who tried to rescue, no, we're not going to be taking calls on the hurricane today, but I'm trying to make a bigger point. There's a story that we have from townhall.com in which Vice President Kamala Harris announced that, she gave, $750 she announced for the hurricane victims who've lost everything. We don't have any more money. FEMA's running out of money here, and we know it's been used for that of illegal aliens here in the United States, housing, food, transportation, health care, et cetera, et cetera. But to our point today, the headline is Vice President Kamala Harris announced, this was yesterday's article, that the United States will cut a massive check to Lebanon in humanitarian aid as American hurricane victims suffer from no water or electricity. We understand, Pastor Schmidt, $157 million for Lebanon to help with infrastructure and the humanitarian crisis, food, water, shelter, protection, sanitation, the very things needed in our own country here at this time.
Well, I'll tell you, Jim, as you just read that, my blood started to boil. I had not heard that particular number until you just read it. What a horrific thing. We have people, and I just came back from Tennessee this Friday, people that were in the hotels that we're in that have lost their homes, that have lost loved ones, that have no power yet. Massive numbers of individuals that are buried in red clay mud where they're finding bodies washing up on shore and literally have to bathe them in order to figure out who these people are. Massive amount of destruction, homes that are totally destroyed, communities like Asheville, North Carolina that are totally destroyed. And now we're going to give a couple $100 to do what? Buy a couple bottles of water and let them die in our country. So this is abominable. Again, I say every single person listening, November is coming, the election's coming. You have to decide, is this the direction we still want to go as America, feeding humanitarian aid to those that are trying to wipe out our allies and someday may try to wipe us out? It's just, I don't know. What are people thinking anymore? It just makes no sense.
And that's her posting. And this is from Vice President Kamala Harris. The people of Lebanon are facing an increasingly dire humanitarian situation. I am concerned about the security and well-being of civilians suffering in Lebanon and will continue working to help meet the needs of all civilians there. And then to that end, the United States will provide, and of course that's where the number of the $157 million comes up in all of this. As we mentioned, just the tease from the last segment coming into this segment here, there are those calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Now, we know that the United States has already stalled things going into Israel at various points here, but now we have the president of France talking about doing just that.
Well, and when you think about some of the statistics that have happened since October 7th, and of course we are commemorating that year, from Lebanon, there's been 12,400 rockets in the last year that have come into Israel from Lebanon. From Gaza, 13,200. From Iraq and Syria, 60. From Yemen, 180. From Iran, somewhere in the 400 to 600 range. All of these countries have been attacking Israel with massive amount of rockets. So we need to understand what is taking place and why. Israel has to defend itself, and America, as well as the other countries that should be defending Israel as an ally, again, America has stepped up. They have done certain things that we can commend, but on the other hand, they've caused some things lacking. Macron from France, the head of France, has made it clear that he doesn't want them getting the assistance. So obviously he's not a supporter of the Jewish people. He's not a supporter of Israel. And I hope America doesn't listen to Macron and does the right thing.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had some very, very pointed words toward Macron and to other countries considering this. Here's what he had to say.
I have a message. I have a message for President Macron. Today, Israel is defending itself on 7 fronts against the enemies of civilization. We're fighting in Gaza against Hamas, those savages who murdered, raped, beheaded, and burned our people on October 7th. We're fighting in Lebanon against Hezbollah, the most heavily armed terror organization in the world, which was planning an even greater massacre than October 7th on our northern border, and that has rocketed Israeli towns and cities for nearly a year. We're fighting against the Houthis in Yemen and the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria that together have launched hundreds of drones and missile attacks against Israel. We're fighting against terrorists in Judea and Samaria who are trying to murder civilians in the heart of our cities. And we're fighting against Iran, which last week fired over 200 ballistic missiles directly at Israel, and which stands behind the 7-front war against Israel. As Israel fights the forces of barbarism led by Iran, all civilized countries should be standing firmly by Israel's side. Yet President Macron and some other Western leaders are now calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Shame on them. Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies? Of course not. The axis of terror stands together. But countries who supposedly oppose this terror axis call for an arms embargo on Israel. What a disgrace. Well, let me tell you this. Israel will win with or without their support. But their shame will continue long after the war is won. For in defending ourselves against this barbarism, Israel is defending civilizations against those who seek to impose a dark age of fanaticism on all of us. Rest assured, Israel will fight until the battle is won, for our sake and for the sake of the peace and security of the entire world.
Pastor Schmidt, your response?
Well, obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, extremely disturbed by this. Here's the issue. What did Israel do to start this war? They did nothing. Hamas, the terrorist group, started this. Hezbollah latched onto it. Houthis latched onto it. Iran latched onto it. Again, we have to go back to the basis. Why is this war happening? Because Iran has stated over and over and over again that they intend to wipe out Israel and every Jew on the face of the earth. So this is not something that Israel started. Israel would love to end it if the terrorists would back down and stop. This would end. But we know it's not going to, because it is what? It is a religious war that until the Islamic people, one of two things has to happen. Either the Jews get wiped out or the Islamic people get wiped out, unfortunately. And we know from a biblical standpoint, Israel is going nowhere.
Pastor Schmidt, at the same time, we have seen such a sharp increase in anti-Semitism across our nation, around the world. We've seen the uprisings on university campuses. We've heard the chants from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We have seen wipe Israel off the face of the earth. A number of the Anti-Defamation League released studies yesterday talking about more than 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents have been recorded in the U.S. since October 7th. That's the highest yearly total on record.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I read the similar report, and it's talked about since October 7th, there has been a 200% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the United States, which means what is taking place? Well, let's be honest about this. A great percentage of these anti-Semitic, anti-Jew, anti-Israel acts that are taking place are being forced into college campuses by kids that have no clue what they're even protesting about. So you've got these leadership individuals, these, if you will, liberal individuals, the Palestinian groups, which have basically made it shame on you if you don't hate Israel. So, of course, many people, and I'll call them sheeple, jump on the bandwagon and start these horrible things. If you ask 90% of these individuals, well, what's wrong with the Jewish person? What's wrong with Israel? They have no answer. It's simply monkey see, monkey do kind of activity. So, unfortunately, people are going to jump onto whatever cause they want to jump onto, whether they understand it or not. And that's why we have this horrific increase in Jewish incidents, anti-Jewish incidents.
Friends, we're opening our phone lines here today to take your questions, your comments on this issue. Our number, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. You study Bible prophecy, Dr. Schmidt, and you're saying that they will not be successful in wiping Israel off the face of the earth?
No, and absolutely not. God gave 4 unconditional covenants to the Jewish people, not to the church-age saints, but to the Jewish people. The Abrahamic covenant, the Davidic covenant, the New covenant, and the land covenant. God has an eternal purpose for the Jewish people. That's why 7.5 million Jewish people, 50% of all Jews, have returned to Israel, just as God prophesied in Ezekiel 37 and 36. Those that adhere to this unfortunate theology called replacement theology and supersessionist theology, no biblical basis for it. God is not through with the Jewish people, and I think we're seeing that in real-time action as we speak.
And taking your calls here today on Crosstalk. Again, the anti-Semitism continues to rise, attacks that are taking place. A story that just came from ABC News. Here's the headline: Minnesota man arrested after allegedly threatening to shoot up synagogue. This is dated yesterday, October 6th.
No surprise.
Yeah.
Again, the incidents have dramatically increased since October 7th. And you've got, whether it's Palestinian individuals that are trying to fight for, if you will, Islam, or whether it's simply individuals that decided to jump onto a hate crime, we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Friends, our number again here on Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Pastor Richard Schmidt is with us today, and you've got a website that you have as well for your ministry.
Well, the easiest one to get to and to remember is prophecyfocus.org, prophecyfocus.org, and that'll get you to our church website as well.
Again, friends, we have open lines here, 800-733-9829. Open lines on our topic today. Let's begin in Dallas, Texas. John, you're on the air.
Hi, Jim. Thank you. So when will Israel repent? When will these wars stop?
Very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the best way to see, we know that Israel is going to be in significant trouble and tribulation that's coming up. When Jesus returns, and we go to Revelation chapter 19, verse 11, Jesus will return with the saints, with the church-age saints, and at that point, the tribulation period will cease. Revelation chapter 19, 11 to 21. Immediately after that, the Battle of Armageddon takes place, and then Jesus, if you go to Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 to 7, Jesus will set up his millennial kingdom, which is, there's so much prophecy on it, but that's the easiest passage to go to. That's when the wars stop. That's when the nonsense ends.
And so Israel is going to go through some very rough times here in the future.
After the rapture of the church, 7 years of horrific tribulation where, quite frankly, yes, Israel will suffer. Jesus spoke about it in Matthew chapter 24 in the Olivet Discourse. Unfortunately, Zechariah 13, 8 and 9 tells us 2/3 of the Jewish people will die during the tribulation, but 1/3 will be preserved.
And that third will believe.
They will
in the Messiah.
They will be brought into the kingdom with the Messiah, yes.
Friends, we'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Getting back to more of your calls. Lines are packed right now. But we'll be back in just 60 seconds. Again, the website, prophecyfocus.org.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Today is October 7th, 2024, as it is a solemn day of remembrance of the more than 1,200 Jews slaughtered in Israel a year ago today. Did we think 1 year ago today that the anti-Semitism of today would be where it is? Indeed, actually, as we broadcast for 8.5 hours 1 year ago today, my reporter on the ground, Aaron Lavarco, and I warned that there would be a whipsaw reaction, that today there is shock and awe. But give it a few weeks, and you'll see the anti-Semitism rise, and that's exactly, sadly, what we saw. This is all in keeping with what the Bible says is coming. But, my friends, be of good cheer. The Bible also tells us that there's going to be a huge volume of Jews that come to Yeshua, Messiah, that not only preach to the Jewish people, but to the Gentiles. Pray for the Jewish nation. God has a special plan for them, even as Satan tries to murder them.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Dr. Richard Schmidt is with us today, pastor of Union Grove Baptist Church, Union Grove, Wisconsin, and also leads a ministry called Prophecy Focus Ministries. Prophecyfocus.org is the website. Let's get right back to the phone lines. We have Don in New Lancaster, Kansas. Don, you're on the air.
Hello. I just wanted to remind all of your listeners that this coming Friday is Yom Kippur, and that's the Day of Atonement. And for a lot of Christians, we understand that the festivals are holy convocations, and God has set appointments with his people. And I think Friday would be a red letter day to kind of be watching to see what happens as far as maybe Iran being dealt with. And I'll get off the line and listen to your comments.
Great. Thank you, Don.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yom Kippur being the holiest day of the year for the Jewish people, it's a day where they literally confess, if you will, the sins that they've done. In fact, they're in what's called the 10 days of awe right now after leading up, if you will, to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. So this would be a time when, yes, I mean, it's a very high potential that Iran could choose to attack Israel on this high holy day. So let's pray for Israel and trust that won't happen.
We have Diane from Oregon calling. Hi, Diane. You're on the air.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. And this may not be on topic or off topic, but I'm just concerned that the storms that are coming against our nation are possibly because of the growing lack of support that the U.S. is having toward Israel.
Thank you for your comment.
Well, Diane, it's a good point, and we don't know that. The only thing we can go to is the Abrahamic covenant when Genesis 12, 1-3, God says, I'll bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse her. Again, we're kind of sitting on the fence. We half support Israel, half don't. Is this truly a sign from God? Well, I can't say one way or the other, but it's something to consider.
And you use that phrase there, and I saw a headline that came recently as well. Netanyahu calls Mideast conflict's choice between blessing or a curse, warns about Israel's long arm. A story that was on FoxNews.com.
Yeah, it's interesting because every nation that's going to support Israel, according to the Abrahamic covenant, that's a good thing. God's going to bless it. And if you turn against Israel and the Jewish people, you're putting yourself in jeopardy, according to God's word.
Our next call from New York City. Isai, you're on the air.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking my call. I'd like to emphasize one point, what Peter was trying to do. And the Lord rebuked him because he was seeing things that men see things. And your commentators there seem to be doing the same thing Peter is doing. Because I tell you, God knows everything. He doesn't judge by what he sees or by what he hears. But he knows the end from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I do know the end from the beginning, and I'm not worried at all what's happening. it's happening according to God's purpose and plan. We should relax more and encourage each other on trust in the Lord. The Lord is not mentioned. It's mentioned what the United States nation wants to do, the French president wants to do. Who cares what they want to do? The Lord knows what they want to do, and they will have the retribution for what they're doing to the people of God.
Thank you, Isai.
Israel is not going anywhere. Israel is the envy of the whole world. The United States of America will turn against Israel.
Yeah. Thank you, Isai. Thank you very much. And due to shortness of time, I think we really got your point in there. We don't negate God's hand in all of this, Pastor Schmidt. You referred to that earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And Isai, I appreciate your passion and your love for the Lord. It obviously came through in your call.
Yes.
And yes, God will indeed preserve the Jewish people. But again, we have to make, we're still, the tribulation isn't here yet. We still have to make decisions. We still have to make voting decisions. We still have to decide as Americans who we're going to support that will support Israel. So it's important that we get all the facts.
We are called to be salt and light, and certainly we speak out against unrighteousness as well. Thank you so much for the call and great reminder. Sam in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, you're on the air.
Yes, gentlemen. I saw a program this weekend entitled Why Stand with Israel, from a biblical perspective, from the beginning back in Genesis to today's time. I highly recommend everyone to pay attention to that. It was most informative, and it's about a 90-minute film on www.whystandwithisrael.org. Excellent information.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to, the state of Ohio, and is it Plim?
Tim.
Okay, go ahead, you're on the air.
Yes, I was just wondering, there's 60% of the Jewish population in the U.S. vote Democrat. Why is that?
Well, that's a great question, and I have some of my Jewish friends, even those that are Jews that are Christians, the Jewish people tend to side with the Democratic people. Well, I don't want to answer for them on that particular thing. But there has been that natural liberal bend, if you will, with many of the Jewish people. However, on the other hand, I'm very close to a Messianic community in Milwaukee, specifically in the Sherman Park area. And I've had some individuals that I've gone to Republican conventions with. So it is interesting, but those that are more, if you will, conservative basis, obviously understand a little bit more about where our position would be.
And President Trump has been challenging the American Jews in that regard as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the call. And, our final caller hung up here, so we don't have to squeeze them in because we're down to less than half a minute. What would you like to leave with our listeners, Pastor?
Well, again, let's go back to the basic thing. Number one is October 7th was a horrific thing. We certainly want to commemorate what took place, remember what took place, remember that we're always going to be under attack by those that are evil, by those that are demonic, by those that hate Christians, that hate Jewish people. Let's get back to a biblical normalcy where God's people, not just, we don't hate those who hate us, so to speak, because Jesus made it very clear, Romans chapter 5, verse 12, but God demonstrated his love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us.
Indeed. And what God has before ordained will come to pass. Friends, thank you for joining us here on the broadcast. Pastor Richard Schmidt with us from Prophecy Focus Ministry, prophecyfocus.org. Pastor, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
And friends, thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.